The new front line in the race for the White House. But why has immigration become such a controversial topic in the land of the free? Also on today's program, new hopes for peace. We talk to the Turkish Cypriot president about his plans for the island's future. And in Picture This, why 2016 could be the US's worst year yet for wildfires. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. The American dream has become a byword for big dreams and big success. A society that enshrined every person's right to life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And millions from around the world have gone to the United States to experience it for themselves. But as the presidential election approaches, a fierce debate is taking place over immigration into the country. Polls show the issue has become increasingly important to voters. So how, in a nation built by immigrants, for immigrants, did immigration become such a divisive issue? Today's newsmaker is the immigration debate in the US and how it might sway the race for the White House.
Immigration.
Illegal immigration.
Comprehensive immigration reform legislation.
Immigration. Broken immigration system.
Immigration has had a starring role in the campaign for the US presidential candidates. Everyone agrees the system is broken, but they have different ideas on how to fix it.
Full and equal citizenship.
They're going back. They're going back. I'm telling you.
The rhetoric from some in the Republican camp has been bold. And so far, it appears Republican voters approve. Despite the number of illegal arrivals falling, immigration has risen into the top 4 issues voters care about for the first time in 8 years. The land of the free, a nation founded on the ethos of the American dream, the opportunity for prosperity and success for all. The Statue of Liberty is inscribed with the poem, "Give me your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." The United States is a country built on the backbone of hardworking immigrants looking for a better life. And immigrants going to America today are chasing that same dream. Buffalo, New York has seen a 95% increase in the number of immigrants in the last 10 years. It has changed the fabric in many parts of the city. Most immigrants have been made to feel welcome. Rubens Mukunzi runs an immigrant newspaper aimed at bridging the gap between newcomers and locals.
I know there's different challenges in immigrants' situation, but we can handle our problem together. I don't see that immigrant would be a problem for this country. I think it will be a solution.
But even in a liberal melting pot state like New York, there is resentment towards immigrants. While the perceived threat of Muslim immigrants has been part of the immigration debate, America's biggest immigration concern is the Mexican border. In 2014, President Barack Obama announced a series of executive orders offering temporary legal status to millions of illegal immigrants, along with an indefinite reprieve from deportation. Both Democratic candidates support this policy and want to extend the reforms further. But for the main Republican candidates, the focus is on securing the border, and none more so than Donald Trump.
We're going to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for the wall. They're going to pay for it.
While immigration is on the list of priorities for American voters, it falls behind government, the economy, and unemployment. And it's unclear whether big talk on immigration policy will be enough to sway voters. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss the immigration debate are 2 journalists from New York. Raul Reyes is a commentator who co-hosts Changing America on MSNBC. And Todd Wood is an author and columnist for The Washington Times. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Let me start with you, Todd Wood. Will immigration decide this election?
Yes, I think it's a signature issue that the American public is extremely worried about on both sides of the spectrum, and I think it's what's driving a lot of the candidates' rhetoric and policies, and I think it will be a defining issue, yes, very much so.
Todd, do you think Donald Trump created the spark from which every other immigration debate continued during this election season?
I think the issue has been simmering under the current of the narrative, if you will, in the media and in the public eye for a long time. And I do think that Trump raised the issue and made it something that people were forced to talk about. I think, especially on the Republican side, they were very much hesitant to discuss the issue and develop a forceful position on it. And I think Trump forced their hand in a lot of ways. So yes, I think he definitely started the ball rolling on this.
Trump started the ball rolling, Raul Reyes, and it is a major election issue. Do you agree with that?
Sure, it is a major election issue, but right now, the way we're seeing immigration play out in the media, it's a major issue because of a very vocal minority who is joined behind Trump, particularly on the conservative side, with his call for mass deportations and building a wall and sending all of these people out of the country. You have to remember, in the United States, we have an undocumented population a little under 11 million, about 10.9 million. And what doesn't often get addressed is what we are going to do with the people who are already here. And I do want to point out, you can read lots of studies and facts and figures from different news organizations, from the New York Times or Washington Post. But when you look at the nonpartisan research, I want to cite one in particular from the Pew Research Center. The fact is that most Americans believe that these people should be allowed to stay. 78% of Americans overall think people should either get a path to citizenship or legal status. Among Republicans, that number is 65%. So we have clear majorities of Americans who want people to stay. We're just not necessarily hearing that this early in the presidential race.
Todd Wood, is the media focusing on the loud minority and not the silent majority?
No, I completely disagree. I think that the American public has been unhappy with illegal immigration in particular. First, let me say that immigration is what has made this country great, whether it's from Europe, Asia, Latin America, whatever. It's what has really refreshed our population over and over again throughout history. But the problem now is it's done illegally. And we are a nation of laws, and the laws are not being followed. And there's a clear path to change those laws if a certain majority or the people want to do that. It's called passing a law through Congress, and the president signs it. These executive orders are just authoritarian and not legal, frankly, and I think the Supreme Court will display that over time. But the immigration issue is one that people are angry about from a number of reasons. One is economics. The American worker has been extremely hurt over the last several decades, and when you have a alliance between the Democratic Party, who wants as many immigrants as possible that they can try to turn into voters, and then allied with a lot of the moneyed interest in the Republican Party, who are looking for very low-cost labor, that alliance is what has hurt the American worker. American workers will do jobs, but they won't do them for free. And if we had a market that would set the real price, and would protect American workers from low-cost labor, I think you would see a much different situation. They would do jobs if they were paid to do them.
Raul, Clinton and Sanders are just pandering, and they want to turn undocumented migrants into potential voters for them. This is what it means when they talk immigration reform, according to Todd Wood. What do you think?
Right. Well, first of all, it's not at all settled that immigrants to this country, whether they're Latino or otherwise, are necessarily Democrats, because I know among the Latino population there's a significant portion who tend to be conservative, socially conservative, and would vote Republican. And I want to dispel one important thing that I think we're missing here when we talk about all this rhetoric around the immigration debate. Right now, the rhetoric does not match the reality, because illegal immigration has been falling in the United States since about 2008. We went from a high of 12.2 undocumented population to, as I mentioned, about 10.9, below 11 million. It's been falling steadily for about a decade. Our border patrol is 20,000, and the government is adding forces. We have one of the most militarized southern borders that we've had in modern history. So the whole notion, as Donald Trump likes to present, that people are pouring over the border and maybe going to become potential voters for the Democratic Party is, I think it's misleading. And the fact is, when the Republicans do talk about immigration, they tend to focus on this myth that immigrants are stealing jobs, which is a myth, and also on the myth of a porous border. What they don't want to talk about in a realistic sense is, what are we going to do with the 11 million roughly people who are already here? We cannot do some type of mass forced immigration system to repatriate them. What are we going to do with those people? That's the question that they tend to avoid.
Todd, we're not avoiding the question here. Would you support deporting 11 million people, as
Yes.
Trump initially suggested, but then flip-flopped on?
Well, we're the United States of America. We can do what we want, and our laws need to be followed. The hemming and hawing on, well, there's 11 million or 12 million or 9 million. I mean, the people are here illegally. President Eisenhower deported 6 million people during his administration. So if we need to enforce our laws, we can.
Raul, you're chomping at the bit to get in there. Raul?
Yes, sir. When we're talking about this idea of mass deportations, which you know, you can talk about it in the theory, and Todd says that we can go ahead and do it, but the basic questions remains: who would pay for that? Because these people are not all from Mexico, from our southern border. They are from Latin America, they are from China, they're from the Philippines, they're from Turkey. Which country is going to pay to send all of these people back? What will be the process to round them up and send them back? The American people are certainly not going to want to pay additional taxes to remove undocumented people. And the undocumented population in this country, to put it in perspective, this number of people we have here, it's roughly equal to the size of the country of Belgium, or equal to about 1/7 of the population of Turkey. So to remove all these people forcibly would be a tremendous economic upheaval, a humanitarian disaster. And speaking of Trump, by the way, it is true that Mr. Trump has legally used foreign workers at his Florida resorts, but he also has a long history of using illegal workers. Trump Tower was built, that's his signature building here in New York City. Trump Tower was built by illegal Eastern European workers, mostly Polish workers. Donald Trump later settled a multi-million-dollar suit brought by them for unpaid wages. The Washington Post has investigated this hotel, which is being constructed right now in Washington, D.C., and found undocumented workers. So we see, even with Mr. Trump, how pervasive our illegal workers and this economy is in our country. What we need to do is not try some mass exodus, which goes against everything the United States has ever stood for. By the way, the Eisenhower program that Todd mentioned is considered a shameful period in our history, a national disgrace. What we need to do is find a comprehensive solution, which would involve securing our borders as we're doing, and building on that to allow a path to citizenship or some type of legal status for the people who are already here. That's what the public wants, and that is the right thing to do.
Okay, I just want to get a final comment from Todd. Todd, there's been a little migrant rush recently at Ciudad Juarez to cross the border at El Paso. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says 150,304 migrants were detained trying to cross from Mexico to the U.S. between October and February. That's up 24% from last year. So there's a little spike. What do you think's happening? Are they trying to get in before a wall comes up with a Trump presidency, or does the future look brighter than ever for somebody coming to America and now's the time to get in? Which one is it, or is it paradoxically and ironically both?
Oh, it's both. Of course they want to try to get in before a new president comes in. You know, President Obama just ordered the Border Patrol to not arrest anyone. My counterpart says the border is secure. I mean, that's ridiculous. Ordering the Border Patrol to catch and release basically is not a secure border.
That's what Department of Homeland Security says, sir.
So you're interrupting me again. So, the issue is not Trump. The issue is not whether it's, makes people feel good. The issue is following our laws. And if we're not a nation of laws, then we no longer have a country. And that is the problem and the issue that needs to be settled.
Raul Reyes, final 20 seconds from you, sir.
Sure, we are a nation of laws, and our new president hopefully will follow the will of the public, which is comprehensive reform. And comprehensive reform includes a path to citizenship or legal status for the people who are already here. There's no other way around this problem. We will have to confront it eventually.
Raul Reyes and Todd Wood, thank you very much for joining us. It's been good to talk to you. Still to come on the Newsmakers, an exclusive interview with the Turkish Cypriot leader about the island's chances of peace in 2016. And in Picture This, fire season starts early in the US. The Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akinci says the ongoing negotiations with his Greek Cypriot counterpart are the last chance for a solution to the Cyprus question. We spoke to him about the prospects for a permanent solution to the decades-long standoff. That's coming up after this report from Andrew Hopkins.
Cyprus, a small island in the Mediterranean Sea. In Greek mythology, it's the birthplace of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. But Cyprus' recent history has been defined by hate. It's a history of mistrust and violence between Turkish Cypriots in the north and Greek Cypriots in the south. In the 1950s and 60s, violence between the majority Greeks and minority Turks was commonplace. Around 25,000 Turkish Cypriots were displaced and hundreds were killed on both sides. In July 1974, Greek nationalists carried out a coup d'etat in Cyprus. Their goal was to unite the island with Greece.
The holiday island has once more become a battleground.
President Makarios fled to London. 5 days later, Turkey sent troops to Cyprus, dropping hundreds of paratroopers and landing thousands of soldiers by sea. Turkish troops quickly gained control of the northern third of the island. The war lasted only a few days, but the battle lines drawn in that conflict have persisted ever since. But 40 years after the coup, and after a number of failed attempts at reunification, there is a new atmosphere in Cyprus. People here are starting to believe that a political solution will bring Turks and Greeks together. That's largely due to the election last April of the Turkish Cypriot president, Mustafa Akinci, who campaigned on a promise to broker a peace deal with the south. And the discovery of natural gas in the waters around Cyprus has provided a new impetus to come together and share the wealth. But not everyone is excited by the prospect of a reunified Cyprus.
I would die of sorrow because I cannot set up a new life as a result of my old age. Whether it be in a tent, under a tree, even in an old building or a prefabricated house, the outcome of my moving to another location would be unknown. Where would they take me?
Up to 30,000 Turkish Cypriots and Turkish nationals live in this farming town, and it's the Turkish nationals who could face the biggest upheaval. In this town, it's not just a question of whether it will be handed over to the Greek Cypriots, and some people will have to move out. Some people may have to leave the island altogether. Tens of thousands of Turkish citizens, like Hikmet Abay, have come to Cyprus in the past few decades, seeking a better life. But although he left Hatay 13 years ago, he's not a Cypriot citizen. And many Greek Cypriots want people like him to leave the island.
I would be very upset because we're talking about leaving everything you have here to start a new life elsewhere. We would face more hardship there because I left when I was still a child. I don't remember or know anyone there.
In the market, a man sings an old Turkish song about there being no need for conflict and that the world is big enough for all of us. But it may be that Cyprus isn't. Andrew Hopkins, The Newsmakers, in the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus.
Well, we sent Andrew to meet Mustafa Akinci, the president of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, in the capital, North Nicosia.
Mr. President, thank you very much for talking to TRT World. There's a lot of optimism about there being a deal on Cyprus this year. Are you optimistic and why?
There are quite some reasons why not only myself but all of us to be optimistic. First of all, I have become president by good majority of my people, 60% plus, with a mandate to solve the Cyprus problem on the basis of bizonal bicommunal federation, and not only that the Turkish Cypriots wants this solution very much, and in fact they proved this 12 years ago when they voted yes in a referendum for a bizonal bicommunal federation. There is a leader on the Greek Cypriot side who also wants to see a solution. We very much devote our time and energy for the negotiation process so that we can come with a plan which can be regarded acceptable by both communities, and hopefully we want to conclude all these negotiations within this year. The problem is at the negotiating table, not
the details, the politics of it.
At the mezze table we don't have any problem. When we met for the first time and we had this mezze, I said that this is what the Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots do it very well whenever they come together. But when they are at the negotiating table, they don't do it as good as that. The time has come to do it as good as that around the negotiating table as well. And we want that to happen, and we want that to happen soon.
Well, joining me now to discuss the prospects for peace is Muzaffer Senel. He's the director of the Center for Modern Turkish Studies at Istanbul Sehir University. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Senel. Would Turkey easily agree to reunification of Cyprus?
Yes, exactly. If you look at it since the Annan Plan period, that Turkey is very keen about the solution of the issue. That we didn't see any kind of the blockade till now from the Ankara, that the blockade, any blockage to any obstacles that creating by Turkey. Since lastly that you know that the Barbaros, the drilling boat is returning back to that to show that it is willingness to the solution process. That's why the negotiations are fully supported by the Turkey we see. And then it's ready to accept any negotiation which agreed on any formula which agreed by the two leaders, and then we'll go to the referendum. If the both sides is accepted, I'm sure what I understood from all these explanations done by the foreign minister or the prime minister of Turkey, that Turkey is ready to accept any solution which is agreed on the both sides.
What would be a red line for Turkey? What would make it unacceptable for Turkey?
Actually, political equality, absolute political equality is more important for Turkey. That the Turkish Cypriots, security and guarantees of Turkish Cypriot should be guaranteed. This is more important for Turkey. All other measures, that the property, all the other things, that more will be the secondary issue. Political equality is directly related with the decision-making procedures, and all these decision-making procedures that should protect the Turkish Cypriots' security and the guarantees of them within to live together with the Greek Cypriots.
Muzaffer Senel, thank you very much for joining us. In today's Picture This, we look at the spate of wildfires in the southeastern US. Last year was the US's worst fire season in history, with billions spent fighting the blazes. And with drier and warmer conditions, scientists say the season is starting earlier and lasting longer than ever before. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker has been the immigration debate in the United States. While many expected the presidential election to be fought on income inequality and job creation, immigration is becoming just as big an issue for voters. And much of that is due to Donald Trump, the billionaire businessman who seems to see it as the key to the Republican nomination. While most people agree with him that there is a problem, there's very little consensus on what the solution should be. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. As always, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.